Hello! Today we're going to take a closer look at the new ACER SWIFT X14, which is the newest version of Acer's thin and light hero with a great 14-inch 16:10 screen. And there are a lot of great things about this laptop, but there are at least some flaws as well. Now, the model I've tested comes with an Intel i7 12700H, an RTX 4050 with up to 50 watt, 32 GB of LPDDR5 4800 MHz RAM and a very fast 1 TB Micron M.2 SSD with up to 5.9 GB per second in reading and 4.7 GB per second in writing speed, fast Wi-Fi 6E and a tiny 100 USB-C AC adapter. The laptop starts at around $1,399 in the US for the 16 GB version and 1,799 euros in Europe, which is once more ridiculous concerning the difference, and at least in Europe too much in my opinion. PS, the version I have here is 1,999 euros. But full disclosure, the price can be very different where you live, so always take laptop prices with a grain of salt. PS, the vast majority of viewers aren't subscribed to my channel, so you know what to do. The design of the ACER SWIFT X is very slick and subtle with its grey aluminum body. The hinge feels very valuable and you can open it with one hand if you can get a grip on the screen, which isn't that easy due to the flat design in the area where the lid and the bottom are meeting when the laptop is closed. So it's doable. And it wakes up from sleep mode in around 4 to 5 seconds, which is not super bad, but it's not great either. Well, it's definitely considered to be a thin and light ultrabook with only 1.5 kg and a height of only 18 mm. The small 100 watt USB AC adapter weighs an additional 380 grams, which makes a total of 1.9 kg. The laptop does not offer performance modes, but you can choose between 4 different fan speed modes by pressing Fn+F. And while we're at it, let's talk about the laptop's biggest flaw, the fan noise. If you're using one of the 3 faster fan speed modes, the laptop is pretty hearable most of the time, or more like all the time, even when you're doing absolutely nothing. And even when the CPU and the GPU are running pretty cool temperatures. The fan is always on and you can always clearly hear it. Even on the slowest fan speed mode, the laptop does not turn off the single fan cooling system when it's in idle. And it still gets pretty loud under full load in the slowest mode. Only if it's unplugged on battery, it can go completely silent from time to time, which is weird considering the laptop only uses around 5 to 7 watt in that case. And you would expect that this little wattage could be cooled in a passive way. I don't know if Acer is going to address this issue and fix it with the BIOS update, but I really hope they do, as this is definitely not what a, in this case, 2,000 euro thin and light ultrabook should behave like. I also have to point out that the fan speed mode really didn't seem to have a noticeable impact on the performance in the tested work-related benchmarks. Only in games I saw about 15 to 20% less performance on the lowest fan speed. The laptop only has one vent at the back, over here, as well as an air intake grid at the top and at the bottom. The display is definitely the most important feature of the new ACER SWIFT X14 this year, and it actually defines the laptop clearly as a tool for content creators and people that have to rely on a great screen for work-related tasks. It's a glossy 16:10 OLED screen with a rarely seen resolution of 2880 by 1800 pixels. It has 120 Hz and it is HDR Black 500 verified. It does not have an adaptive sync technology though. The pixel density in this case is a very high 242 ppi. The maximum brightness was up to 500 nits and it has a near perfect color accuracy as well. I've measured it myself with a Spider X Pro. It will surely do a great job for creatives and content creators. And the first time I saw the Windows desktop wallpaper at maximum brightness, it just really popped. I guess there is a reason why they use that image. The white illuminated keyboard has 2 brightness levels and no numpad. The keyboard flex is barely noticeable, and I was able to achieve a good writing speed, even though I personally prefer bigger keyboards and more key travel, but it feels and sounds very valuable. The big touchpad is super smooth and super slick, with a subtle clicking sound and feel. The power key also has an integrated fingerprint sensor, which worked flawlessly for me. The ACER SWIFT X has an exceptional build quality, and I have absolutely nothing to criticize in that regard. It really doesn't need to hide when it's being compared to a MacBook in that discipline. Connection-wise, we are getting a micro SD slot, a USB 3 port and a Kensington lock on the right side, which is rarely seen these days. And on the left side, we are getting another USB 3A port and two USB-C 4 ports with Thunderbolt, but you will need one of those to charge the laptop via the 100-watt AC adapter. The two downward-facing speakers can get pretty loud, and the sound is pretty clean and decent, even on the maximum loudness, though we have the expected and common lack of bass most laptops suffer from, especially if they are thin and light. But overall, the sound is really good.
By the way, this is what the integrated Full HD camera looks like and the integrated microphone sounds like.
The 76 watt-hour battery in the ACER SWIFT X14 can provide really decent runtimes, as the i7 13700H manages to become really power efficient. On idle with 20% brightness and Wi-Fi, I got a runtime of around 13.8 hours, and watching YouTube I still achieved a very good 6.5 hours with 50% display brightness and headphones at 20% loudness and activated Wi-Fi. In Cinebench R23, when the SWIFT X was plugged in, I got up to 17,850 points on the multi-core test in the first run, plugged in, and 1,681 in the single-core score. In PC Mark X, I saw up to 7,092 points plugged in and around 4,000 points on battery. I also wanted to run the budget system benchmark for Adobe Premiere Pro, but since a new version is out with a totally different score system, it's hard to tell if the performance is above or below average. However, if you want to compare it to your system, it scored 464 points in Adobe Premiere 23 and the benchmark version 0.98.0 from May 2023. In Blender, I was testing 3 different demo files and compared the results with a higher TDP RTX 4050 mobile and a higher TDP RTX 4060 mobile, where it is actually in the same ballpark as its biggest sibling. But keep in mind that the 6GB of VRAM can become a limitation in bigger composings, especially if you're using the optics renderer in Blender. But then in the end, it's not a workstation. However, this ACER SWIFT X14 will be perfect for stuff like Adobe Photoshop, RAW photography editing, 4K video editing in Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and still great for 3D apps like Blender or Maxon Cinema 4D, especially if you're getting the 32GB version. Now, even though the laptop comes with the NVIDIA RTX Studio drivers, which are more or less the same as the regular gaming drivers and can be considered marketing, the laptop is able to deliver enough gaming performance for most games out there, or let's say for all games out there. So I just tested a few games to give you an idea of what to expect, but the RTX 4050 is definitely a bottleneck due to its lower wattage in this case. I was recording the gameplay with NVIDIA Shadowplay, so the actual FPS are a bit higher than what you see here, but I measured the actual FPS without recording, of course. And one important note up front. I often had to cycle through the fan speed modes via Fn+F when playing a game, or otherwise the CPU would throttle at around 12 watt, causing all games to stutter terribly. But once I did that, it was working fine. I hope that ACER is going to address this issue in an upcoming BIOS update. In Hogwarts Legacy, I was using the medium preset at the native resolution, combined with DLSS on performance mode, which still gave a very clear and sharp image due to the 14-inch screen and the high resolution, and saw an average of around 63 FPS with pretty wild frame times most of the time and a 1% low of only 28 FPS. So Hogwarts Legacy is pretty demanding and not optimized very well. Still, it is of course playable in general. PS, if you're okay with using frame generation and the bigger input lag it is causing, I would definitely recommend doing so, as it smoothens the frame time drastically, allowing for a better gameplay with much less stuttering. In God of War, I was using the medium preset at the native resolution combined with DLSS performance once more. And again, I have to point out that you can't really see the difference quality-wise thanks to the high pixel density. It still looks really great. I saw an average of around 71 FPS with a not so good 1% low of only 32 FPS. And you can definitely see that the frame time graph is pretty wild, meaning the game is not super smooth. It's again still somewhat playable though if you're not too picky about that. I also have to point out that the WASD keys became very hot when playing for a while. In CSGO I was using 1920 by 1200 pixels, which still looked very sharp combined with low settings, and saw an average of around 223 FPS and a 1% low of 111. So this game is perfectly playable on the ACER SWIFT X14 of course. I'm pretty sure you could even use higher settings and still get acceptable FPS. I know, this is not a gaming laptop, but it can game. Even on the high resolution screen, especially when you're using lower resolutions, which, as mentioned before, still looks surprisingly good on the 14-inch OLED screen. If you're not running into VRAM trouble on the RTX 4050, that is. But all esports titles and most recent AAA games are perfectly playable even on higher settings as of now. While we're at it, I highly recommend checking out my RTX 4050 review video over here if you haven't already done that. And by the way, these are the 3D mark results I achieved on the ACER SWIFT X14. Now overall, the ACER SWIFT X14 is a really good and powerful ultrabook with decent connectivity, good speakers and an amazing screen. Its only real flaw clearly is the fan noise. And then of course it all comes down to the price, as always. I think the 2,000 euros in Europe for the 32GB version are way too high. $1,400 for a 16GB version, just like this. I think that starts to make much more sense. But again, make sure to check the current price if you're watching this before buying it. If you came here after buying it to get some confirmation, congratulations, it's a great laptop. And I've actually been serious with the MacBook comparison. It basically has most features that people like about MacBooks while still being a much more affordable Windows laptop. Let me know in the comments what you think about that, if you made it that far. Now that's all for today. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing and hit that like button as well. That helps a lot. Thank you very much and thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye bye and cheers.